I've just watched Brexit the Movie, and so here's my review. This documentary is, in summary, a neoliberal take on European history in the EU. So it's the standard group of people: Nigel Farage, Daniel Hannan, Matt Ridley, Douglas Carswell, James Delingpole, that are effectively our homegrown equivalent of the US Republicans that believe in small government, market solutions to problems. They believe that the NHS is a socialist mistake, many of them, and would like to see it privatised. They tend to be climate change skeptics, and regulation is clearly the main theme of this whole movie, and they are strongly for deregulation. So the film goes like this. We're taken on a walk through European history from the viewpoint of regulation in economy. So we're told that in the 19th century the UK did so well because all of this industrial advance was deregulated. Then, as we get into the First World War and the Second World War, apparently our own government grabbed more control and put in more regulations, and this is what slowed our economy down. Whereas in post-war Germany, they had their economic miracle because of high deregulation. We looked across the channel, saw that they were having it good, wanted to join in, but the EU was founded by a Frenchman, a socialist Frenchman, and that is why we have so many regulations that we're stuck with now. We need to pull ourselves from this and be free from this Euro elite setting our laws without our control. That's essentially their narrative. So, let's tackle a few things here. One is the level of bureaucracy. 2 is the promise of prosperity on Brexit. 3 is regulations, and 4 is the whole sovereignty, democracy, freedom bundle. With bureaucracy, we're given the strong implication in this film that lots of money goes into lots of people being employed in a bureaucratic layer. The EU has 55,000 civil servants for the whole 500 million people. In the UK, we have well over 400,000 civil servants. The EU budget that goes to administration is 6% of the total budget. It's actually fairly lightweight. They point out in the film that there are 90 EU buildings around in Brussels. Well, in the UK, we've got 13,900 government buildings that own 16.4 million square metres. Now, onto the promise of prosperity on Brexit. The idea is that when we are unshackled from all these regulations, we will be doing so very well. And as they tell us this, they have this aeroplane turbine in some factory in the foreground. Now, isn't it ironic that Airbus and Rolls-Royce have said otherwise? They have warned strongly about the dangers of Brexit, have so many innovative companies and so many credible economic authorities in general. The argument peddled in this film is Daniel Hannan's favourite argument that at the moment, because we're shackled to the EU, we can't make all these free trade deals with the emerging economies around the world. But then weirdly, they also say in the film that free trade deals are becoming less and less relevant because the World Trade Organization is lowering those barriers anyway. So they get themselves into a bit of a pickle like that. I mean, the clear thing with trade deals, and particularly within the single market, is about regulations. When you set regulations, you do two things. You ease up cross-border collaboration, but then you also set standards of operation that usually protect against adverse events. And this is clearly where this Brexiteer crowd have a problem. They don't like the type of regulations that we bring in the EU. So let's think about what these regulations are for in real terms. Recently we had a bit of a global problem with our banks. One such bank was Northern Rock. CEO was Matt Ridley, who features in this film, talking about how it's terrible we have so many regulations. Well, when Northern Rock went down, it was the first UK bank since 1878 to have a run on its finances, and it cost the public, the UK public, 27 billion. That's 400 quid on my head, 400 quid on yours, and everyone in this country. That's a lot of money. So we need protections against cowboy behaviour like that, because boom and bust is no good. We also need layers of protection for the environment and for working conditions. And this is what we agree in common with our neighbours. And this is precisely the kind of layers of protection that the EU are putting into place to guard against the free marketeers like this crowd of Brexiteers that would do us a lot of damage. So finally, though, we are told that in order to be part of the EU, we have to give up some freedom and some sovereignty and democracy. Well, this is a pretty strange charge, because the way I see it is, what was the last freedom of mine that I had crushed by the EU? The way I see it is, I've got freedom of movement at the moment, and because of freedom of movement I have the freedom to hire whomever I want from the EU without visa systems. I have free time thanks to the Working Time Directive, meaning that my employment hours are limited, and there's freedom to have maternity leave and paternity leave, and lots of our fundamental rights are guaranteed. That's what we do. And if you're talking about loss of freedoms, a lot of that would go on Brexit. In terms of democracy, at the moment, we vote for people on the national level, and also we vote for MEPs that do have real power on the international level. If we were to pull out of the EU, who would be representing our interests on the international level? Our governments would be lobbying the EU from outside, and maybe have appointed lobbyists to do so. That's not very democratic. So my summary would be this, that when these Brexiteers talk about freedom, they really mean their own freedom to rule our country. It won't provide any more personal freedoms for you or I. They just dislike strongly the direction that the EU is going in, because they are ideologically different, and so they want to take control for themselves, but it will offer no more control to you and I over the decisions that affect us. And in fact, it could reduce those dramatically, because free marketeer philosophy is very disempowering for the small person and hugely empowering of businesses, and this is a bad trend when we've already got strong inequality growing in the world. So watch Brexit the Movie and be afraid.